It was a quiet house, though filled with voices. The children's laughter, the husband's requests, the reminders from the pots on the stove. Everything echoed, but inside her there was only a deep hole, a kind of exhaustion that didn't scream, it simply weighed. Martha was 48 and had a schedule that barely fit into a tight agenda. She woke up at 5 a.m., made breakfast for everyone, handled the household chores, cared for her elderly mother, and still found time to listen to others' problems without anyone noticing her own. Time to her was a gift she gave to the world, but never to herself. She couldn't even remember the sound of her own laughter. Her dreams, stored in invisible boxes, stacked behind the emotional refrigerator she built to survive the days. She didn't cry, didn't complain, didn't stop. She was admired by everyone, and no one knew the cost of that. Martha was the kind of woman everyone claimed to admire, but no one really saw. Her eyes were always cast downward, not out of submission, but out of habit. The last time she went to the movies, tickets were still printed on paper. The last time she bought something just for herself, it was a discounted blouse, still in her drawer, waiting for an occasion that never came. The mirror became an enemy, reflecting a stranger she didn't remember choosing to become. Time, that subtle thief, had taken her youth and left in its place a woman who survives but doesn't live. Her body, once light, now seemed to carry everyone else's days. Her soul, asleep, anesthetized by the habit of always putting others first. And even with all this, Brookfield remained calm, as if her pain were invisible even to the wind. In the routine she was perfect. In the emptiness she was a mystery, and no one noticed. John, her husband, though physically present, hardly noticed when she changed her hair or stopped smiling. The children, Daniel and Sophie, took the ready breakfast, the ironed clothes, the packed lunch as a given, as if a mother's love were an eternal, tireless machine. No one asked when was the last time she slept through the night or did something just for joy. She couldn't remember either, because over time she gave up wanting. Martha existed like a shadow, useful, functional, invisible. She said she was fine always. But "I'm fine" repeated for years turns into a prison. And she was locked in. Not behind bars but behind habits. Her smiles were programmed responses, not spontaneous feelings. What hurt the most was forgetting herself. She once dreamed of being a literature teacher, of writing a book, learning French, dancing tango in Buenos Aires. So many dreams, archived under the weight of a duty she imposed on herself. No one ever told her it was forbidden to dream. She forbade herself, believing that love required total sacrifice. And that mistake became a routine. Now, at 48, she looked at life like someone staring at a road too long to turn back on. She felt old, tired, forgotten. And even so, deep down a spark still burned. Faint, almost imperceptible, but alive. It was the whisper of lost dreams knocking at the door of her exhausted soul. In her thoughts, Paris seemed like an unreachable planet, and the piano lessons she always wanted became inside jokes in her mind. One morning, while making coffee, Martha looked out the window and saw a young woman jogging down the street. Colorful sneakers, headphones, a light expression. The scene was simple, but within it there was a freedom Martha had forgotten existed. Something in her trembled. A vague memory of when she too used to run. Before marriage, before children, before getting lost. It wasn't envy. It was longing for herself. For the first time in a long while, she felt restless. And that restlessness, small as a seed, was the beginning of something new. Still imperceptible, but real. She looked at her own hand holding the cup, and wondered how long it had been since she held something just for pleasure. The cup trembled slightly, as if sensing an internal shift. That afternoon, she opened an old drawer and found a worn-out notebook with a blue cover. It was her youth diary, where she used to write poems and dreams. She read a few pages, eyes teary, heart tight. "I want to be happy without apologizing," one passage said. Martha smiled sadly. She didn't know when she had forgotten that. But in that forgotten page she found a key. She didn't yet know how to use it or where it would lead. But for the first time in decades, she knew there were still doors. She closed the diary carefully, like someone protecting a rare flower. And in that deep silence, she heard an inner voice whisper, "You're still here. And that's enough for now." Martha's awakening wasn't a revolution, but a slow infiltration of awareness. It was like small cracks opening in the routine to let timid rays of light in. She began to notice things that used to go unnoticed. The scent of the flowers on the porch, the taste of coffee when taken slowly, the cool touch of her favorite mug's ceramic. The day after finding the diary, she allowed herself something unthinkable. She had coffee alone on the porch, without making it for everyone else first. It seemed like a small, almost ridiculous act. But to her, it was like a first breath above water. Of course she felt guilt. The voice of duty still lived inside her. But there was another voice, softer, newer, saying, "This is yours too." And she listened. For the first time she listened. Back inside, she noticed no one had realized. John was still asleep. Daniel and Sophie were locked in their rooms, busy with their phones. No one missed her presence because, in a way, they had always assumed she would be there. Ready, available. And in that not being noticed, there was ironically a kind of freedom. If no one noticed her absence, maybe she could begin to exist in other places, without causing alarm. With that thought, Martha started planning a walk. She grabbed an old pair of sneakers, comfortable pants, and a light jacket. She didn't know exactly where she was going, just that she had to go. And she left. Brookfield was waking up lazily, but the morning breeze held a taste she hadn't felt in ages, the taste of possibility. In the first block her body complained. Her knees cracked, her feet felt like stone. But she kept going. She passed by the bookstore where she used to dream of working. She stopped in front of the window and saw a Virginia Woolf book. She smiled. How many times had she written about that woman in her teenage journals? Martha closed her eyes for a moment and, standing on the sidewalk, promised herself she'd return to buy that book. Not out of duty, not to please anyone, but because it connected her with who she was before giving herself away. She kept walking and, as she turned a corner, she saw a small dance studio. On the front, a sign caught her eye. Beginner adult classes. Discover yourself through dance. She felt butterflies. She thought of Buenos Aires. She thought of herself. She returned home with aching legs, but her eyes were brighter. When she walked through the door, no one had noticed her absence. Breakfast wasn't ready, the kitchen was a mess, and for a moment she hesitated. The old impulse to rush and fix everything surged. But she held back. She went upstairs, took off her shoes, sat on the bed, and took a deep breath. The world hadn't ended because she left. The house hadn't collapsed. The kids were still fine. And she was alive. She began writing in a new notebook. It wasn't the diary of youth anymore, but a diary of rebuilding. She wrote, "Today I walked. I saw a shop window, felt the breeze. And for the first time in a long time, I was mine." In the following days, Martha began waking up a little later. She allowed herself to eat before the others, chose her clothes with more intention, wore lipstick even if she was staying home. Small gestures, nearly invisible, but to her they meant reclaiming herself. John started to notice. He said, "You're different." She just smiled. She didn't explain, didn't justify, didn't apologize. Because for the first time, she didn't feel guilty for choosing herself. The children noticed too. Sophie, the youngest, asked if they could go for a walk together on Saturday. And that invitation felt like a small miracle. Not a religious one, but an intimate, everyday miracle. The miracle of being seen. On a rainy morning, Martha finally entered the dance studio. Her hands were sweaty. Her heart raced like a teenager's. She felt ridiculous, old, out of place. But she was welcomed with smiles. There were other women there, all with stories in their eyes. Some laughed nervously, some were there on doctor's orders, others out of loneliness. And they all danced. Martha danced. Her feet stumbled, the rhythm was uncertain, but the laughter came easily. And in the studio mirror, she saw something she hadn't seen in a long time, a sparkle in her own eyes. When she got home, she told John. He said, "That's nice, honey," without looking up from his phone. She didn't feel hurt, because now she knew. Her worth didn't depend on his recognition. She danced for herself. One ordinary Sunday, she went to the bookstore and bought the book. She sat at the cafe next door, ordered a tea, opened the first page and started reading. She felt like a stranger there, a woman alone reading at a cafe, but also a whole woman. Hours passed, and she didn't notice. As she left, she saw her reflection in the shop window. It wasn't the Martha from 20 years ago, nor a new version made to please. It was her, with her wrinkles, her story, her pain, and her peace. And in that reflection, she saw the seed that had sprouted in the dark. Not an explosion, but a quiet certainty that even after being extinguished for so long, the flame was still there, and that all it took was a breath of courage to make it grow. That clear sky morning in Brookfield, Martha chose to walk a different route. It was no longer just a new habit. It had almost become a silent ritual of reuniting with herself. The sun filtered through the trees like a blessing, and the breeze brought the scent of mint from the nearby market. She felt lighter, even though the world around her remained unchanged. She wore a light blue dress and let her hair down, something rare. Passing through an old square where she used to play as a teenager, she heard a child's laughter, bright and clear, followed by another voice. Deep, steady, oddly familiar. The sound called her. She stopped. Her heart thumped strangely, as if recognizing before seeing. And then she saw him. On a bench under a cherry tree sat a man reading aloud to a little girl with golden braids. When he looked up, time stopped. It was Ethan Blake, her first love, the only real love. The one she'd dreamed of running away with at 18, going to New York, sharing a tiny apartment, writing books, drinking cheap wine, watching sunsets through the window. They loved each other with the intensity only youth knows, and parted with a pain only time could silence. He had left to study abroad. She stayed. Life took them down different paths. And now there he was, the same and yet different. His gray hair added peaceful charm. His green eyes still held that blend of irony and tenderness. He saw her too. Their eyes met as if they had never lost each other. For a few seconds, the world around them fell silent. No sounds, no doubt. Just two stories intersecting once more. The little girl beside him, curious, noticed the moment. "Daddy, who's that lady you're smiling at?" Ethan chuckled softly, a bit embarrassed. He stood and walked slowly toward Martha, as if afraid the spell would break. She didn't know whether to smile, cry, run, but she stayed. When he reached her, he simply said, "Martha," and she answered. "To this day I wonder what might have been," he smiled. "Maybe now we'll find out." The little girl stepped forward, took her father's hand, then reached out to Martha. "Hi, I'm Lily. You're pretty." It was as if the sky opened. That little girl was light. And in that moment, unknowingly, she became a bridge. Cupid for a love that had only slept. They sat together on the bench. They talked of everything and nothing, of the lost years, of choices, of unspoken longing. Ethan had divorced 2 years earlier, was raising Lily alone, and lived near Brookfield. Martha spoke of her children, of how she was trying to rediscover herself, of the years she'd spent forgetting. He listened with his eyes, with his whole being. Speaking wasn't an act. There was no judgment, no hurry, only presence. Lily played with dry leaves as the two laughed over old stories. It was as if time had merely paused, not ended. In that reunion, Martha didn't feel guilty. Not wrong. She felt alive. Loved at last with maturity. In the days that followed, Ethan and Lily appeared more often during her walks. Coincidence? Martha didn't believe in that. Lily began holding her hand. She asked questions. Did Martha like ice cream, cartoons, dogs? One day, out of the blue, she asked, "Can you come have dinner with us tomorrow?" Ethan laughed. "Seems I've been dismissed as intermediary." Surprised, Martha simply said yes. That curious child, with attentive eyes and an open heart, recognized in her something even her own children hadn't: sweetness. Dinner was simple and full of laughter. Lily insisted Martha read her a story, and when she fell asleep on the couch, the two adults remained side by side, in peaceful silence. Their hands met naturally. No fuss, as if they already knew the way. One evening, while walking together by the lake, Ethan said, "You know, I thought I'd lost you forever." Martha looked at the sky, then at him. "Maybe we only delayed it. Life was too busy for both of us." He hugged her slowly, and in that embrace she cried. Not from sadness but relief. As if all the weight she'd carried for decades had finally found somewhere to release. Ethan didn't try to rescue her. He simply stayed. And in that moment, staying was everything. When they returned home, Lily slept in the back seat. Before they parted, he said, "We'll never lose each other again." Martha, looking into his eyes, replied firmly, "This time I choose to stay." What Martha didn't yet know was that this reunion not only reignited an old love, it planted the possibility of a new future. Lily, with her spontaneity, would begin calling her my favorite grown-up friend. In the days ahead, letters were exchanged, books recommended, movies watched together. What began as a resurrected memory was transforming, little by little, into a lived present. And for the first time in ages, Martha's heart had no guilt beating harder. She had loved before, but now at last she was loved back, by a man, a child, and above all by herself. Ethan's smile, once steady with calm assurance, began to hide behind a subtle shadow. One ordinary morning, while walking with Martha in the park, he paused mid-step, as if the ground slipped beneath him. He sat on a cold iron bench, staring up at the sky as if seeking answers. In that instant, past and present merged. He, who had once been unshakable, now felt his body betray him. After medical tests, the cruel news arrived. A serious heart condition requiring immediate care. Fear, once a stranger, settled in. But by his side stood Martha, steady like the rock he'd always needed. The diagnosis shook them, but also illuminated something sleeping in both. They realized time was more precious than hours wasted in silence, and, "I'll do it later." Ethan, who had held himself back out of caution, began to embrace every moment as if it were the last. Martha, reconnected to life, saw the opportunity to turn love into action. In moments, in eternity. They began to savor small pleasures, a glass of wine at dusk, an ice cream from the corner shop, long, aimless conversations about what they might still do. Each detail became a celebration. Their days took on a new color. After the diagnosis, their routine consisted of waking together, savoring coffee slowly, watching birds through the kitchen window, laughing at the silly things only true lovers understand. Martha, who had forgotten freedom's taste, now felt life pulsing in every breath beside him. Ethan was careful, but didn't let fear rule him. They decided to plan a trip to a mountain cabin, an old dream they'd never dared pursue. Amid laughter and preparations, each step was a challenge, but also a quiet pact to enjoy whatever time they had. At the chalet, surrounded by nature, they lived days of pure magic. The sun set behind the trees, painting the sky in orange and purple hues. They sat on the porch, hands entwined, watching the dance of shadows and light, as if the spectacle existed just for them. Ethan shared childhood stories. Martha spoke of the poems forgotten in her diary. The simplicity of each moment made everything grand. No promise of eternity was made, because now they understood eternity lay in the present, in the gaze that welcomes and the voice that soothes. Ethan's daughter, Lily, became an essential part of this new life. She moved between them as a bridge of joy and lightness. On a clear day, they held a picnic by the lake. Lily ran, laughed, while Martha and Ethan sat on a checkered blanket sharing strawberry chocolate ice cream. It was so simple yet so extraordinary. Those small joys became invisible pillars supporting the love blossoming despite adversity. Ethan, despite his limits, never stopped dreaming, and Martha learned it's never too late to chase what warms the soul. Yet the shadow of illness surfaced in quiet moments when fatigue overtook him, and Martha held his hand without a word. It was a silent dialogue between two hearts aware of life's fragility, but choosing to celebrate each beat like an eternal poem. The fear of loss didn't extinguish their light. On the contrary, it made every second life richer, more grateful. Ethan showed Martha that love isn't only for easy days. It's the courage to face the unexpected. In the following days, while walking through the woods near the cabin, they talked about what they still dreamed of. Ethan, wearing a tired but hopeful smile, confessed he yearned to see the sunset by the sea, feel cold sand beneath his feet, and hear the waves, something he never did in youth. Martha promised they would do it together, even if it had to wait until next summer. They planned small outings, impromptu candlelit dinners, movies watched in silence, where every touch carried eternity. She understood that even simple dreams can anchor you amid the storm of illness. One afternoon, seated on the porch with a cool breeze caressing their faces, Ethan made a silent vow. "As long as I can, I'll live each day as if it were both the first and the last." Martha held his hands and, looking deep into his eyes, replied, "And I will be here to remind you it's never too late to begin again." Their life became an open book, each chapter written with tears, laughter, fear, and courage. Love no longer lived only in memory. It was a vibrant reality. And even with illness looming, they loved with the strength of those who know time may be short, but can be infinite in intensity. One quiet night, while Martha slept, Ethan passed away. He died in peace, cradled by the love he had planted and nurtured until the end. His absence brought sharp pain, but also a deep lesson for Martha: to honor her dreams, care for her soul, never wait to be happy. Time does not forgive postponement. She learned happiness lives in details, in small choices, in encounters that rekindle dimmed light. And with a shattered heart, she felt gratitude for having loved, been loved, and above all, having rediscovered herself. Life goes on, and with it, the certainty that it's never too late to be happy. The morning following Ethan's silent farewell, the world seemed to lower its volume. Martha did not cry out loud, did not shout, but her silence was a mute prayer, a reverence to the life they had lived in time's margins. The cabin remained untouched, still carrying the scent of coffee he made and the notes she still found in corners. She didn't move anything in the first days. She slept in his shirt, walked slowly, whispering things to the pillow as if he could hear. Grief came in waves, but with it came the memory of everything they had lived. And it was that memory that sustained her. Not like someone bearing a weight, but like someone holding a balloon. Ethan had gone, but left in her something so strong that death could not take: the freedom to be herself. Gradually, Martha began walking around the lake alone. First in short steps, then with steadier gaze. On one of those walks she passed the bench they always sat on together. She sat, closed her eyes and softly said, "I am still living, my love." In that instant, she knew it wasn't an end. It was the beginning of a new kind of love, one that no longer needed physical presence to exist. The pain became a seed, and from that seed something beautiful would grow. She began writing letters. To him, to herself, to time. Letters she kept in unstamped envelopes brimming with truth. Each was a way to converse with longing, to keep joy alive. A month later, she returned to Brookfield. The house felt smaller, but her soul felt larger. Sophie, her daughter, hugged her tightly, and together they allowed themselves to cry. But it was not only mourning, it was gratitude. In the neighborhood, Some neighbors noticed something different about her. Her calmer stride, her more attentive gaze. Martha now paid attention to the small miracles of daily life. A senior crossing the street, a flower unfolding on the sidewalk, a child's laugh. It was as if, after losing someone, she had rediscovered the world. Then she decided to create something from what Ethan had taught her, living without rush. So was born the idea of gathering women once a week to write love letters. Not necessarily romantic, but any love worth celebrating. The first meeting took place on her porch with 3 friends. Clara, who'd lost her husband 2 years earlier, Beth, newly divorced, and June, a retired teacher who had always dreamed of writing. They brought teas, simple cakes, and notebooks. They wrote in silence for long minutes. Then they read their words to one another. They laughed. They cried. And they realized the paper was more than paper. It was a bridge. Healing. Rescue. The next week there were 8. Then 12. And so, the Living Letters Club became a small beacon of light in the neighborhood. Every woman who arrived brought her pain, her hope, her story. And every letter written was a gentle shout saying, "I am here. I exist. I still love." Martha wrote to Ethan every week. Sometimes she spoke of the weather, of the meetings, of longing. Other times she simply thanked him. "Thank you for teaching me how to live before you left," she wrote once. She kept all the letters in a wooden box dated with the day he died. A silent but powerful ritual. It reminded her that life isn't made of eternities, but of moments lived fully. And that love doesn't end with death. It just changes form. One day, after ending a meeting, Martha looked at all those women smiling over words and tea, and understood. Ethan was there in some way, in every transformation, in every seed sprouting. During an interview they gave to a small local newspaper, Martha was asked, "What is love?" She smiled, looked at the reporter and replied, "It's when someone makes you remember who you are, even when they go away." Her answer spread through the neighborhood like a soft wind. People began leaving anonymous notes on park benches, writing things like, "You are enough. Happiness is looking for you too. It's never too late to start again." It was as if the love Ethan and Martha had lived had taken root in others. And Martha, unwittingly, became a sower. Not of pain but of hope, faith, of new beginnings. In the last letter Martha wrote to Ethan before the anniversary of his death, she wrote, "You gave me myself back. And now I spread that into the world as best I can. Through words, through meetings, through silence. If life is a book, you were the chapter that taught me how to write my own endings." She carefully folded the letter, tied it with a blue ribbon, and placed it in the box. Then she walked to the lake, alone, as she used to with him. She sat on the same bench as before, closed her eyes, took a deep breath. She smiled. A full smile, new, born from pain and bathed in peace. It was a rebirth, not only of love but of Martha herself. Time passed as one steps slowly over the soul's wounds. Days ceased to hurt and began to teach. Ethan was no longer absence. He became a gentle presence, like the morning coffee aroma or the sound of rain on the roof. Martha learned that love does not end with departure. It changes form, lodges in details, and becomes company in life's margins. Pain turned into longing, longing turned into memory, and memory turned into strength. That's how she began living with more calm, more color, more meaning. She learned to be alone without being empty. She found beauty in small routines. Watering plants, organizing books, making tea just for herself. Silence ceased to be prison. It became space for reunions with herself. Writing letters became a bridge between lived love and shared love. Club once small grew. Women of all ages gathered weekly with her to write letters, to distant children, forgotten loves, or simply to themselves. It was as if, while writing, they reordered their souls. Each sealed envelope carried within a piece of healing. Martha smiled at the sight of faces opening, eyes shining, words freeing what had once been knots. Some women cried aloud. Others laughed amid nostalgic paragraphs. What had once been pain was now communion. The room that once held mourning had become a stage for rebirths. Martha began writing a book, inspired by the letters. It was titled Words That Also Love. It wasn't an autobiography, but everyone knew it was. On each page there lay a piece of her and Ethan. There was no intention of publishing. She wrote because she needed to eternalize what she felt, for their story not to die, and so that other women would know that it's still possible to bloom, even after autumn. Writing became a ritual. She woke early, played soft music, made chamomile tea, lit a candle and let the words flow. Without pressure, without hurry. Because now she knew that what's true comes in the right time. Ethan's daughter, Lily, began visiting frequently. She brought flowers, books, memories, and that smile halfway to him. The two formed a sweet friendship, real complicity. Lily said she felt her father closer when she was with Martha. And Martha felt the world less lonely when Lily crossed her garden. It was as if Ethan still took care of them, by crooked lines, by small gestures. Sometimes they walked hand in hand to the market, chose fruit, had ice cream like in old times. They laughed a lot, planned trips, made simple promises like never ceasing to write. And deep down they knew they were saving each other. The days now smelled of cake fresh from the oven and tasted like good conversation. Martha painted her living room wall yellow, changed the curtains, adopted a cat named Hope. Small changes full of meaning. She said it was like decorating the heart from within. Neighbors noticed. She seemed different, more alive, more light. She smiled while watering plants, hummed old songs, walked barefoot on wet grass. It was as though she'd returned to being a girl, with the wisdom of someone who survived winters. Her love for Ethan hadn't stopped her from living. On the contrary, it propelled her into life. And now, more than ever, she knew, time doesn't erase what's true, just gives new meaning. During one of the club gatherings, an 82-year-old woman read a letter to her deceased husband. I took too long to forgive myself for still being alive. But today I understand that living is also a way to honor those who've gone. Martha cried, not from sadness but from recognition. Because it was exactly that. Living now was her tribute to Ethan. Each light step, every smile offered to the world, every letter written was an echo of the love they had lived. The club became shelter. Words turned into wings. And while marked, her heart now beat with steady rhythm. For the first time in a long time, she knew she was happy. Not the happiness in ads, but the deep, silent kind that lives in someone reconciled with her own story. Martha began telling everyone, "It's never too late to feel again. And every time a new woman entered the club with downcast eyes and left with hope in her hands, she felt sure Ethan was still there. In the details, in the paper, in a love that does not fade. And more than that, now she too was there. Whole, present, live. Martha never felt alone again, because she understood that she had never truly been alone. And because inside her now lived an entire garden of memories that bloomed whenever she allowed herself to feel. Yes, Ethan died in his sleep. But in her he awakened a whole woman, free, who now spread that freedom like perfume. As she closed the book and tucked away the last letter, Martha rose from the chair, opened her arms and felt the wind brush her face. Felt like an embrace. It was him. It was life saying, "Thank you for having loved." And she replied in silence, looking up at the sky, "I still love. And I always will."